She was 45 years old, and the entire town called her the Old Maid, laughing at her attempts to find love. But when the 500-year-old alpha vampire revealed he had waited centuries for her, no one knew that this ancestral encounter would awaken a soulmate connection that would transcend time and eternity. The town of Millbrook was one of those places where everyone knew everyone else's business, and Helena Rosewood had become the favorite subject of local gossip. At 45, she walked the cobblestone streets, hearing whispers that cut like invisible blades. "There goes the old maid," murmured Martha from the bakery, shaking her head with false pity. Still trying to find a husband at her age, the group of ladies at the town square laughed discreetly. The shop windows reflected her solitary silhouette as she returned from work at the municipal library, where she organized romance books that others lived but she merely catalogued. Each reflection in the glass was a cruel reminder of the life she had chosen, or that had chosen her. The apartment on the second floor of Main Street awaited her with its predictable routine: tea for one, dinner for one, television for one. Helena was a woman of rare natural elegance, with silver-streaked brown hair that she always wore in a classic chignon, and green eyes that held untold stories. Her clothes were always well chosen: silk blouses, perfectly cut skirts, genuine leather shoes, because she believed dignity began with appearance, even when her heart was broken. Inside, she carried a weariness that went beyond her age. These were decades of first dates that led nowhere, of family members asking, "When will you give us a wedding to celebrate?" Of married friends who stopped including her in dinner parties because odd numbers mess up the table. She had tried online dating, blind dates organized by well-meaning colleagues, even therapy to open her heart to new possibilities. But deep down, Helena always felt she was waiting for something or someone specific. It was an inexplicable sensation, as if her soul recognized a song it had never heard, a face it had never seen. "Maybe I'm too picky," she thought as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. "Or maybe I simply wasn't born to be happy in love." What she didn't know was that across town, someone had been watching her for much longer than any mortal could imagine. Helena's humiliation reached its peak during the annual charity ball at Millbrook's social club. She had dressed with special care that evening, wearing the navy blue dress she saved for special occasions and the pearl necklace inherited from her grandmother. But the moment she crossed the threshold of the main ballroom, the whispers began like a cruel symphony. "Look at that! Helena's still trying," murmured Constance Weatherby, the banker's wife, loud enough for half the room to hear. 45 years old, and still dolling herself up like she's 20. It's pathetic. The group of ladies around her laughed discreetly, but with enough malice to make Helena feel each chuckle like a stab wound. Margaret Phillips, her former schoolmate who had been married 3 times, didn't miss the opportunity to twist the knife deeper. "Did you all hear she's trying those dating apps for mature people? Can you imagine the desperation? A woman her age chasing men on the internet." The laughter grew louder, crueler. The worst moment came when Helena tried to approach the buffet and overheard a conversation between 2 women in their 20s. "My mother says women who couldn't get married by 40 have serious personality problems. That must be why she's alone. Who would want an old woman to start a family with?" Helena pretended not to hear, but her hands trembled as she reached for a glass of water. She had spent an hour getting ready, rehearsing conversations in the mirror, gathering courage to socialize once more. And there she was, being dissected like a pathetic specimen by the society that had known her since childhood. Adrian Blackwood observed the scene from the social club's terrace, invisible in the autumn night shadows. His 5 centuries of existence had taught him to recognize many things: predators, prey, lost souls, broken hearts. But when his supernatural senses captured Helena Rosewood's essence, something awakened in him that had been dormant for 500 years. It wasn't just the aroma of sadness and humiliation emanating from her, though that was as palpable as perfume in the night air. It was something deeper, more ancestral. The energetic vibration her soul emitted resonated with frequencies he had searched for across centuries, like a song finally finding its perfect harmony. Adrian had protected the Rosewood lineage through generations. but he had never felt such a powerful and immediate connection. His golden eyes gleamed in the darkness when he realized he wasn't just observing another descendant of the family he had sworn to protect. He was finding the soulmate he had waited 5 centuries to fully awaken. The decisive moment came when Helena, unable to bear more humiliation, rushed out of the ballroom and stumbled on the marble entrance steps. She would have fallen face first if strong arms hadn't caught her with speed that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "Careful," said a deep masculine voice, laden with ancient accent and genuine concern. Helena looked up and found the most striking face she had ever seen, aristocratic features sculpted by centuries of elegance, hair black as night, and golden eyes that seemed to see directly through her wounded soul. "I'm sorry," she stammered, trying to regain her composure. "I shouldn't have run out like that." Adrian kept his hands on her arms a few seconds longer than necessary, studying her face with an intensity that made Helena feel truly seen for the first time in years. "You don't need to apologize for refusing to accept cruelty," he said, his voice carrying centuries of wisdom. "Especially when that cruelty comes from people too small to recognize your true nature." Helena blinked, confused. "My true nature? You don't even know me." Adrian smiled, a smile that managed to be both mysterious and warm. Helena Rosewood, born March 15, 1980. Municipal Librarian, lives alone in the apartment above the flower shop on Main Street. Lost her parents 8 years ago, never married, and carries within herself a light that this town is too small to comprehend. The astonishment in Helena's eyes was complete. "How do you know all that about me?" "Because I have been waiting 500 years to find you." In the days following their encounter at the social club, Helena couldn't get Adrian out of her mind. He had asked to meet her at the historic cafe downtown, a public place where she would feel safe, but the conversation that followed challenged everything she believed about reality. "Your great-grandmother, Eleanor Rosewood, died in 1943, said Adrian, stirring the coffee he wouldn't touch. "She had the same green eyes as you, the same crescent moon birthmark on her left wrist, and the same ancestral energy that makes my heart dead for 5 centuries, beat again." Helena nearly dropped her cup. "How could you know about the birthmark?" "I barely pay attention to it myself." Instinctively, she covered her wrist with her coat sleeve. "Because I was there when Eleanor was born," Adrian replied with a calmness that made his words even more disturbing. "And when your grandmother was born in 1920, and your mother, in 1952, I've protected all the Rosewood women for generations, Helena. But you're different." The cafe seemed to have fallen silent around them, as if time had slowed down. Helena studied the man before her. There wasn't a single wrinkle on his face. His movements had supernatural grace, and there was something in his golden eyes that seemed too ancient for such a young body. "Different how?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "You're the first to live long enough to fully awaken," Adrian explained, leaning slightly forward. "The others died young, before discovering their true power. You've reached 45, the age of ancestral awakening." During the following weeks, Adrian courted Helena with patience and elegance that belonged to a bygone era. He appeared at the exact moments when she left work and needed company for the walk home. When she dined alone at the Italian restaurant and a bouquet of roses appeared at her table. When she visited the cemetery to place flowers on her parents' grave and found him there, respectful and silent. "How did you know I'd be here today?" Helena asked on a Sunday afternoon, finding him reading an ancient book on the bench near her parents' tombstone. Adrian closed the book. She noticed it was written in Latin, and smiled with a melancholy that seemed to carry centuries of longing. "Because I knew your parents, Helena. I knew your grandparents. I knew your entire lineage. I know you come here every first Sunday of the month, at 3 in the afternoon, and you always bring white lilies because they were your mother's favorite flowers." Helena sat on the bench beside him, observing the headstones that marked her family history. "This should scare me, shouldn't it? A man who claims to know my family for generations, who appears in the right places at the right time, who talks about ancestral power like it's something normal." "It should," Adrian agreed. "But it doesn't scare you, does it?" Helena shook her head slowly. "No, and that's the strangest thing of all. I feel At home when I'm with you, like I've known you my whole life. The most important conversation happened on a rainy night, when Adrian found her at the municipal library after closing hours. Helena had stayed late organizing books, and when she came out, he was waiting under an antique umbrella that looked like it came from a period film. "Are you going to explain once and for all what's happening between us?" Helena asked, stopping under the library's awning. "Because I'm 45 years old, Adrian. I'm past the age of believing in fairy tales." Adrian approached, extending the umbrella to protect her from the rain. "Helena, I waited 500 years, because I knew you would be worth every decade of solitude. Every century of waiting. Every moment of pain from not finding you sooner. How can I believe someone would wait so long for me?" she asked, but her voice trembled with something that wasn't fear, it was recognition. Adrian gently touched her face, his fingers cold as marble, but comforting. "Because soulmates recognize each other beyond mortal time, Helena. Because when I find you in this life, my heart remembers all the times it lost you in previous lives." The rain fell around them, but Helena barely noticed. For the first time in 45 years of life, she felt completely seen, completely understood, completely loved. "Then show me," she whispered. "Show me who I really am." Helena's definitive breakdown happened on a rainy Tuesday in November, after what she would later call the worst day of my life. It all started when she arrived at work to find a bouquet of wilted flowers on her desk with an anonymous note, "For the library spinster. Maybe in the next life you'll have better luck in love." The day worsened when she overheard two teenage girls in the romance section commenting about her. Poor thing. She must read these love books because she'll never have her own. And it hit rock bottom when, leaving work, she found James Morrison, the widower she secretly admired, passionately kissing a 30-year-old woman in the library parking lot. Helena ran home through the torrential rain but couldn't even make it to her apartment. She collapsed, sobbing in the public garden in front of her building, sitting on a soaked bench with her makeup running and her heart completely shattered. That's where Adrian found her. "Helena," he said, appearing from the shadows with a large umbrella that instantly covered her. "What happened? I can't take it anymore," she sobbed, the words coming out broken. "I can't stand being a joke anymore, being pitied. Maybe they're right, Adrian. Maybe I really am a pathetic failure who invented a romantic fantasy with you because I can't accept that I'm going to die alone." Adrian knelt before her on the wet bench, completely indifferent to the rain soaking his expensive clothes. With eternally gentle fingers, he lifted her face to meet his eyes. "You don't understand," he said, wiping tears with eternal fingers that trembled slightly. "Every night of these 500 years, I dreamed of this moment. Your soul has been shining for centuries, waiting to awaken, Helena. Every tear you shed now is a tear I shed in solitude, waiting for you." He removed his coat and wrapped Helena in it, the fabric carrying a masculine scent mixed with something ancient and comforting. "During all those years you thought you were alone, I was here. Invisible, but present. Warding off dangers you can't imagine. Guiding opportunities so you would remain safe until the right moment." Helena looked up, confused by the intensity of emotion in his voice. "What do you mean?" Adrian hesitated for a moment, as if he were about to reveal a secret kept for centuries. "The car accident you almost had 3 years ago. I diverted the other driver. The serious infection you had at 30. I accidentally left the right medicines on your library desk. Every time you felt strangely protected walking alone at night. Every time a dangerous situation resolved inexplicably. I was there." Helena stopped crying, processing his words with a mixture of amazement and recognition. "Why? Why would you do all that for me?" Adrian sat on the bench beside her, looking at the hands that had protected so many people across the centuries. "Because 500 years of solitude teaches you to recognize your other half when she finally appears. I'm not just an ancient vampire, Helena. I'm a man who lost his family in the 16th century and spent 5 centuries learning that true love transcends death, time, and physical form." He turned to look at her directly. "In each generation of your family, I identified your ancestral essence respecting Your great-grandmother Eleanor had your eyes when she smiled. Your grandmother Margaret had your strength when facing adversity. Your mother Catherine had your gentleness when caring for wounded people. But you have all of that plus something the others didn't live long enough to develop. What? Helena whispered. The wisdom of maturity, the depth that only comes with years of experience, the ability to love without youthful romantic illusions, but with the solidity of someone who knows the true value of companionship. Adrian held her hands in his, and Helena felt an energy that seemed to connect her to something greater than herself. Helena Rosewood, I solemnly promise that you will never suffer alone again. You will never again be the subject of mockery from people too small to recognize your true nature. Because from today forward, you have someone who waited 5 centuries for the privilege of protecting you, loving you, and building with you the eternity that fate denied us in all previous lives. The rain stopped exactly when he finished speaking, as if the universe itself was applauding the promise that would echo through the centuries. After the night of rain and revelations, Helena began to truly allow Adrian into her life. For the first time in decades, she woke up feeling there was something worth getting dressed up for. She started using perfumes she had saved for special occasions, choosing clothes that brought out her green eyes, and smiling at herself in the mirror, not from vanity, but from recognition of her own worth. Adrian, noticing the gradual change in her, began carefully revealing aspects of his supernatural world. During an intimate dinner at her apartment, he demonstrated how he could move objects without touching them, how his eyes glowed golden in the darkness, and how he could feel her emotions as if they were physical waves in the air. I'm not afraid, Helena said when he hesitated before revealing his supernatural speed, disappearing and reappearing across the room in a fraction of a second. I should be, but I'm not. It's as if my soul already knew who you really are. The first moments of true emotional intimacy happened when Helena told Adrian about her recurring dreams of a golden-eyed man protecting her in scenarios that seemed from other eras. I dreamed of you before I even met you, she confessed, touching his face with growing confidence. I dreamed that someone was waiting for me, that I wasn't destined for solitude. Their nightly walks became sacred rituals between them. Adrian took her to places only he knew, an abandoned garden where centuries-old flowers bloomed only under moonlight, an ancient bridge where he had waited for decades watching generations of her family pass by, a secret overlook from which the entire illuminated city could be seen. During one of these walks, when Helena stumbled on a loose stone, Adrian caught her against his chest with a speed that should have been frightening. But instead of fear, Helena felt an electric current run through her entire body, as if every cell recognized his touch. What's happening to me? She whispered, still in his arms, feeling a strange energy pulsing through her veins. You're awakening, Adrian replied, his golden eyes glowing intensely. Your ancestral lineage is activating. You're connecting with who you really are. Their first kiss happened that same night, under a full moon that seemed to watch them like a celestial blessing. When Adrian's lips touched hers, Helena felt not just passion, but memories, flashes of other lives, other times, other bodies, but always the same soul, finding the same soul. She saw a woman in a Victorian dress being courted by an elegant man, saw a medieval peasant being protected by a mysterious knight, saw a Renaissance aristocrat dancing with a golden-eyed man. They were all her. They had all loved the same man who was now kissing her with 5 centuries of accumulated longing. When they separated, Helena was breathless, but not from lack of air, from excessive life. Her skin glowed with a subtle luminosity that hadn't existed before. Her green eyes seemed to have gained oceanic depth, and she could feel Adrian's heart beating, even though she knew vampires shouldn't have heartbeats. Now, do you understand why no mortal could complete you? Adrian asked, touching her face with reverence. Why no relationship worked? Why you always felt you were waiting for something, or someone specific? Helena smiled, and for the first time in 45 years, it was a smile completely free of pain or doubt. I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life without knowing it. Like every man I met was just a pale shadow compared to you. Like my heart knew it had to wait for the real version. And now, Adrian asked, intertwining his fingers with hers, now that you know the truth about us, about what we are together. Helena looked at their intertwined hands, his eternally young and strong, hers marked by the experience of nearly half a century of life, but both perfectly fitted like pieces of a cosmic puzzle. Now I understand why I needed to live 45 years to find you, she said, because I needed all that experience, all that pain, all that loneliness to be ready for a love that transcends time and mortality. I needed to be woman enough to love an eternal man. Adrian pulled her closer, whispering against her forehead, and I needed 500 years of existence to learn how to love you the way you deserve to be loved. That night, under the stars that witnessed centuries of history, Helena Rosewood finally understood that she wasn't a failed spinster. She was an ancestral soul who had waited her entire life to awaken to her true destiny. The Blackwood mansion rose against the night sky like an ancestral guardian of millennial secrets. Helena had never imagined such a place existed on the outskirts of Millbrook, a Victorian Gothic construction with towers that seemed to touch the stars and windows that glowed with welcoming golden light. When Adrian led her through the wrought iron gates, she felt as if she was entering not just a house, but a dimension where time worked differently. This is my true home, said Adrian, guiding her through corridors adorned with ancestral tapestries and furniture that had clearly crossed centuries. The place where I've kept 5 centuries of memories, waiting for the day I could share them with you. What left Helena completely breathless was the portrait gallery in the main hall. The walls were covered with paintings dating from different centuries, all with golden plaques indicating years ranging from 1543 to 1923. And in each of these paintings, there was a woman who could be her twin sister. My God, Helena murmured, approaching a portrait dated 1756. The woman in the painting had her exact green eyes, the same delicate bone structure, even the birthmark on her left wrist. This is me. This is Sarah Rosewood, said Adrian, his voice laden with centuries of longing. You lived as her for 24 years before dying of tuberculosis. And here, he pointed to another portrait, is Margaret, from 1847. You were her for 31 years before a carriage accident. And Catherine, from 1923, who was lost to the Spanish flu at 29. Helena touched each portrait with trembling fingers, and with each touch, flashes of memories that weren't hers, or were they, flooded her mind. She saw herself wearing dresses from other eras, dancing in ancient ballrooms, being courted always by the same golden-eyed man who now stood beside her. When the full moon reached its peak, illuminating the gallery through the Gothic windows, Adrian positioned himself before the ancestral fireplace and made the confession he had kept for 5 centuries. Helena, he said, his voice breaking with accumulated emotion, in each of your past lives, I lost you too early, always too early. As Sarah, I was just a young aristocrat without the power to protect you from disease. As Margaret, I was still learning my vampiric powers. As Catherine, I was on the other side of the world, fighting a supernatural war, when you needed me. He approached her, his golden eyes shining with centuries-old tears. This time, I have eternity to love you properly. This time, I have the power, knowledge, and experience to ensure I never lose you again. Helena felt the weight of centuries of love and loss in his words. That's why you waited so long to reveal yourself completely. That's why you were so careful, so patient. Because this time it had to be perfect, Adrian confirmed. This time you had to choose consciously, with the maturity and wisdom that your previous lives didn't have time to develop. Adrian knelt before her on the centuries-old Persian rug, taking her hands with a reverence that spoke of adoration accumulated through the ages. Helena Rosewood, he said, his voice echoing through the ancestral hall, do you accept living eternally with me? Do you accept fully awakening to your ancestral powers and becoming my companion through all the ages to come? Helena looked around the hall at the portraits of all the women she had been, at the fireplace that had warmed centuries of waiting, at the man who had loved her through multiple lives and never given up on finding her again. I accept awakening to who I really am, she replied, feeling a courage that came not just from her, but from all the women she had been before. I accept becoming who I should have always been by your side. The ritual began when Adrian delicately cut the palm of his own hand with an ancestral dagger, letting a few drops of golden blood fall into a silver chalice engraved with symbols that seemed to pulse with their own life. This isn't a vampiric transformation ritual, he explained. It's an ancestral awakening. You already carry the power in your lineage. It just needs to be activated. When Helena drank from the chalice, she felt an energy that began as gentle warmth and expanded through every cell of her body. Her skin began to glow with subtle luminosity, her green eyes gained oceanic depth, and she could feel memories of 5 centuries of love, uniting in her expanded consciousness. Now we are truly eternal, Adrian whispered, kissing her as the transformation completed. Now we have all the time in the world to love the way we always deserved to love. Helena smiled, feeling for the first time in all her lives that she was completely home, completely whole, completely ready for the eternity that should have always been theirs. Then we begin our true story now, she said, intertwining her fingers with his forever. 6 months later, the one everyone called the Old Maid now reigned as the eternal companion of a centuries-old alpha, discovering that true love has no expiration date. Helena Blackwood, she had adopted her husband's ancestral surname, woke every morning in the Gothic, Victorian mansion feeling as if she had been born for this life of supernatural elegance and ancestral power. Her physical transformation was subtle but undeniable. Her brown hair now had golden highlights that gleamed under any light. Her skin had gained a luminosity that made people stop to look twice, and her green eyes had a depth that seemed to contain centuries of wisdom. But the greatest change was in her presence. Helena radiated a confidence and magnetism that made everyone around her gravitate in her direction. Adrian watched her transformation with a satisfaction that transcended 5 centuries of waiting. "You've become everything I always knew you could be," he said one morning as she arranged the garden roses, with movements that seemed to make the flowers grow more vibrant at her touch. "The woman I loved in all your lives, but now with the power and maturity to be truly immortal." The wedding took place in an ancestral supernatural ceremony that brought together beings from various dimensions to witness the union of soulmates that had crossed centuries. The ceremony was held in the mansion's garden during a special full moon, with vows written in ancient languages and rings forged from metals that had existed since the dawn of magic. Helena discovered that her awakened powers went far beyond longevity. She could feel other people's emotions as physical waves, influence plant growth with her touch, and most impressively, access ancestral memories, not just her own, but of the entire Rosewood lineage that Adrian had protected through the centuries. Revenge against those who had humiliated her came elegantly and naturally. James Morrison, the widower who had rejected her, appeared at the mansion a week after her wedding, apologizing and hinting at interest. Helena received him with an icy politeness that made it clear he had lost his chance with an extraordinary woman. "You had the opportunity to meet Helena Rosewood, the librarian," she said with a smile that managed to be both polite and cruel. "Now you meet Helena Blackwood, the matriarch. And this version of me doesn't forgive mediocrity." The town of Millbrook quickly discovered Helena's mysterious transformation. Her new presence was impossible to ignore when she walked the streets. Conversations stopped, people turned to stare, and an aura of power and elegance followed her like invisible perfume. The same ladies who had once ridiculed her now competed for her attention. Margaret Whitfield, the mayor's wife and former main antagonist, appeared at the mansion with an invitation to chair the city's charity committee. "Helena dear," she said with a forced smile, "we always knew you were special. We would love to have you as our honorary president." Helena accepted the invitation, not out of vindictiveness, but because her new nature compelled her to use her power for the community's good. She transformed the annual charity event into the greatest success in the city's history, but made it clear that her generosity came with well-defined limits. The family that had ignored her for years, distant cousins who had never cared about her solitude, began appearing with requests for financial help and invitations to family gatherings. Helena received them politely, offered help when genuinely needed, but never let them forget how they had treated her when she was just a spinster librarian. The greatest symbol of her transformation happened when the municipal library organized a ceremony to name her director Immortal. The same colleagues who had once joked about her love life now watched her with a mixture of admiration and respectful envy. "Helena was always special," said her former supervisor during the speech. "We always knew she was destined for great things." Helena smiled, remembering all the times this same woman had made malicious comments about her spinsterhood. On the night of the ceremony, she returned to the mansion where Adrian waited for her in the ancestral library, reading by the fireplace as he had done for 500 years of solitude. "How did it go?" he asked, standing to embrace her. "Perfect," Helena replied, resting her head on her husband's chest and listening to the heart that had started beating again because of her. "They finally see who I always was. And who you always were was worthy of waiting 5 centuries for," said Adrian, kissing the top of her head. In that mansion that echoed with solitude for 5 centuries, eternal love now resonates, proving that soulmates find each other at the right time, even if it's after 500 years of patient waiting, and that sometimes, the most beautiful happy ending is the one that blooms in maturity. When we're finally wise enough to recognize and value true love,